Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett, and alongside me, as always, is Dr. Dave Peltz. How you doing, sir?
Most brilliantly this morning.
Okay, so little stumble. So there it is. Got to
It's the
finish that
coffee.
coffee. Well, thanks for all of you who are returning our returning audience, or if this is your very first time, thanks for joining us. Hopefully, you'll gain something from this particular episode. If you're watching this episode, you'll see we have a guest speaker on the screen. So, for those of you who can't see, we have Dr. Kimberly Moore with us this morning. How are you doing this morning?
I am wonderful. So glad to be joining the both of you.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. And so, with that, we'll have you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, or tell the audience a little bit about you. We know a little bit about you already. So,
Yeah, so I am so excited to be joining your audience today. I am Dr. Kimberly Moore, and I have spent the last couple of decades doing what I love, and that's being involved in the world of workforce, innovation, and education, and really kind of pushing those to the limit. So I've enjoyed whether serving as a CEO, leading a workforce system, or serving in academia as a vice president, driving innovation. And now, as we think about that third chapter, as an entrepreneur, having been an entrepreneur, now casting that on the outside and sharing the good news and gospel, what I call it, in the world of workforce development and economic development. So, again, it's a pleasure to be joining you all, and I can't wait for a conversation.
all right. Well, we're glad to have you, and I'm sure it's going to be a good one. How you just talked about several things that we enjoy talking about. So, with that, we'll have you get started with our topic. And today's topic is creating doors. So, what does that mean to you?
For me, it's recognizing that one, life is not linear, and that oftentimes it means thinking out of the box and creating what doesn't exist, whether that's a new opportunity, whether it's a new career, whether it's reimagining your own brand, but really it's that openness and willingness to do just that.
Okay. No, I like that because that's one of the things I say oftentimes is just opening your mind to the possibilities, and what you just described is just that. Like you said, it's not linear. Things change. Again, we talked about this before too. If you even if you had a blueprint or a roadmap to get you to a certain location, it is more than likely going to change. So for you to remain open is going to help you create that new door or change that door, what it looks like. I mean, you may redecorate it, but it's creating some other type of door. So I really like that.
Yeah, and Kim, I was just writing out life is not linear, and then you also said your new brand. So Joe and I are kind of like nee, 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 on the same wavelength as always. Um, but your new brand, I think that's important because Joe and I are both veterans, and when our military careers ended, not ended, I mean when we got out of the military, I guess served our
Right.
time. Um, we had to create a new brand for ourselves. We had to reinvent ourselves. We had to find ourselves again. And then when we went through corporate America, we had to find ourselves again. What does that mean? And then when we got into academia and higher education, what does that mean? What does that brand look like? And now this podcast, what does this look like for Joe and I? And so I think it's important that you brought up your new brand because we don't have a singular brand. I can put on my professor hat or my consulting or coaching hat, my veteran hat at any time. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And I love that you said your new brand.
Yeah, I think for me, especially when you think about all the different phases and experiences that we'll have over time, it's important to know that it doesn't end with a period. I mean, you talked about a number of chapters that you all experience. I view life with commas. So
Mm.
it's comma this, comma that next. It's not that I'm losing, I'm adding to, I'm becoming that best version of myself, but it's a mixture of everything that I've experienced. So I think the more, especially with our listeners, as they view life and think about it, that you're not having to leave one and transition to the next. It really is a combination of the best things that you're pulling from those times and those experiences that make you the unique person that you are. So I love, I call it living a life of commas.
Yeah, I think
That's a
that's
great
brilliant.
way to
Yeah.
look at it. Yeah, again, because me and David talk about this before, oftentimes because that's what I think our challenge was when we, left the military. We had to become this whole different person, this whole different identity, and like he touched on all the, academia, and we thought we had to put those different hats on. But you're right, it is a combination. It's a culmination of all those things that you are. That's what makes you you, and you makes you unique. And I think a lot
Yes.
of times we get hung up on, well, I have to fit this mold. I have to fit this mold. And again, we try and, me and Dave have talked about this before too, scraping some of the stuff you have off of your resume or who you are to
Yeah.
fit into that other thing versus taking that whole you into that new brand or that new thing. And but it's a lot of times it's because people don't receive you that way either. That they want you to fit, okay, I'm hiring you for this or I'm selecting you for this. That's all I need from you. I don't need all that additional stuff that you have or bring to the table. So a lot of times it's not just us, but it's us trying to fit that idea of what that individual wants from us.
I think, it's important. We always talk about right fit, right fit, right opportunity. So when I reflect on what you just said and trying to make it fit, then I would question whether that's the right opportunity for you because I have found, and I certainly mentor and share with others, if you cannot bring your whole self to the space and there be a recognition that you are a whole person and not just a singular thing, you have to wonder whether that's the best place to invest your time and talent. It's not that you'll use all those different things every day, but the awareness that it makes sense to have someone with rich experiences
Right.
to add to the different perspectives and challenges that'll be faced. I think, companies, whether you're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, or whether you're working for this huge company that's not requesting either of those skills, it's important that they have this rich tapestry of experiences that people bring to the table. And anytime that's quieted down, you have to wonder, again, the mindset of where and culture of where you're going. So I would encourage listeners to just be mindful of that.
Yep.
Yeah, the life with commas thing, that's still just like going over. It's like it's on like I don't know, auto breed. I don't know. It just keeps spinning around over and over and over. And when you said bring your whole self, it brought me right back to the hat comment, putting on different hats. It's not
Yeah.
so much different hats. It's one hat with a bunch of pins, a bunch of flair
Yes.
on it. And that's really what it boils down to from what I'm hearing and understanding. And it's like one of those aha moments. It's been a few hours since I've had one, but but to your point, you have to bring your whole self. And Joe and I often tap into that when we say, make sure that you're getting paid what you're worth. I think that was
Right.
one of our earlier episodes, and not let yourself be taken advantage of because they go, ooh, we got a doctor here. Bring him in as a grade one. We're gonna really use this one up. Yeah, get what you can out of them. And that's happened to Joe and I. And it's it's our decision to let that happen
Right.
whether we realize it or not. And so when I heard you say bring your whole self, there's like an asterisk up there, like, yeah, but just be aware of what self you're bringing because and why you're bringing it.
Right. And while you're bringing it and making sure that, we can never encourage as much as we possibly can. When I think about this environment now where it's so competitive, employers post a job now, you got 1,000 applicants in one day. That's the world that we're in. And so you can feel compelled to, I must turn into this, apple
Right.
because they're only
Right.
looking for apples when really you're a mango. And so, really, just thinking about happiness and what that means to be able to bring your whole self, because when you bring your whole self, that's where you're going to produce at the highest level, to accept less and to go in knowing that it's an apple fit and you're a mango. I mean, it really, you will not be happy. And it's, there's a chance that the employer may not be happy too, because inevitably our self comes out.
Yeah.
And if that's who
Yeah.
we are, that's who we are. So acceptance, even in this day and time, we talk about the authentic self and being genuine, but oftentimes I think that is sometimes forgotten as job seekers are out there in the market and you're like, I just want to land something. So something is better than nothing. And I'm like, even if it's not a right fit and you're depressed every day and you need counseling, no. So really just being mindful of that and being aware of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that is a challenge for most of us, though, that, because again, we're trying to fit in, we're trying to fit that mold that somebody has actually set for us. And we don't really understand what that means because, like you said, we're just trying to get a job, we're trying to get a paycheck. And we accept that. And Dave said it earlier, we accept it willingly, not really thinking about further down the line how that's going to make you feel or how, but at the same time, that employer or whoever selects you, not thinking about all those things that you brought to the table, like you said
Right.
earlier, that they how they can maximize on that. And I think that's the biggest challenge is that you go in there willing to say, okay, I know you brought me in here at this, but look at all these things that I can do for you. And like Dave said earlier, a lot of times you're taking for granted or you're taking advantage of. And
Right.
that's the downside. It would be great if you could go in and maybe they don't recognize those things at first, but then they start to learn and like, oh wow, this is a gym. This is
Yeah.
what we need. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
that very rarely happens. So a lot of times we're left with, like you said, the this job doesn't feel good. I don't want to be here. That type
Right.
of, yeah.
Well, and I think too, and I know Dave, you're about to jump into, but I think a lot of where we are now. I mean, the world is on like microwave has surpassed it. It is turbo speed, and so this whole notion of everyone being an innovator and everyone driving innovation, you get caught up in those buzzwords. But I would venture to say that for companies and organizations, just because you say it, that doesn't mean that's who you are in your culture, because just because you say you like innovation and someone comes in with new ideas and you shut them down, well, you're not very open to these new perspectives. So I think just organizations being mindful of that, and then again people being mindful too, because I think you do yourself a disservice to package yourself into a way that to fit when really it's a misfit. They're not ready in their maturity, the organization's maturity. I mean, everybody has to be prepared to meet one another, and so it's just an interesting thought process. But again, I think it's one that we have to look at, especially as we go into 2025, that, as you're doing your searches, that you are prepared to really present yourself in the way that you want to be perceived throughout.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, that whole idea of trying to fit in, and how you're creating doors or you're potentially closing doors, but you're closing the right doors and you're actually opening others. And
Yeah.
one of my past supervisors told me, he said, you're going to have one of two things. You're either going to have a horse that you're trying to push through the door, or you're going to
Right.
have one that you have to pull the reins back because they're just wanting to go down as fast as they
Yeah.
can down the field. And it's like, so you have to understand who you are when you go into these doors. Are you that person that's ready to run down the track and just,
Yeah.
well, and hopefully they're holding on and catching up with you, or are
Yeah.
they the one that's pushing you through that door? And then you have to think, if they're pushing you through that door, is this really the right door to be going through?
Totally agree with you. And I think for me, when I think about creating, doors and our whole topic of conversation, sometimes it means, if there is not a fit, the great thing about entrepreneurism is that you create a fit and you maximize those skills that you have, because by and large, maybe your skills do not fit in an organization, but they do fit for when an organization needs that skill. So maybe it's a different kind of relationship, and really assessing that, what I it doesn't have to come boxed depending upon what generation, because now we talk about five generations. In some instances there are six generations in the workplace. So depending upon where you've come from, it may not be commonplace to say, well, hey, I'm just going to create a job. Can't find a job, create a job. But for, I think about our Gen Zs and others, it's like I don't want to live that dream of 30 years at one place and, get the gold watch or the gold plate and, hey, I've checked it out, for 30 years. That's not what life looks like for them. And so I think being prepared to create doors and for employers to understand that if you want this talent, because you're going to need a workforce, you need a workforce now, you'll need it in the future. That also means creating doors in the workplace. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
it's not just something that you view from an entrepreneurship lens.
Yeah, when you were saying that, again, my mind is going racing a million miles an hour. To your point, about accepting an innovation, you know, if someone comes to you in your organization and they say, "Hey, I see an opportunity," and you shut them down, that's not closing the door. That's slamming the door in their face.
Yes.
You need to walk into the room that they're in and listen to them and cultivate that idea because they're seeing something that you or your leaders or your managers are not
Yes.
seeing.
And that's okay. I think the recognition, and I always tried to lead my teams is that, what, we don't work by positions, that anyone can be perceived as a manager and anyone can bring a great idea to the table to take us to that next level. Listen to the ideas. I always ask, flesh it out. But by and large, I wouldn't care. I didn't care whether it was the receptionist or, a case manager or whoever has that great idea, that we must be a space of innovation. That's what separates us. And so I'm glad that you've pointed that out, that yes, it results, oftentimes it won't be communicated, but in essence, you've shut down a person who's probably going to be quiet quitting, a new term for us, right? Quiet quitting on the job as they pursue and look for that next opportunity that allows them to bring the best version of themselves to the table.
Yeah, and I that again that's one of those challenging things as we think about leaders and leaders in the past where I'm the boss, you do what I say, I don't want to hear all this other stuff, and that's where we're failing as leaders because again, like you said, everyone brings something valuable to the table, and anytime you say, well, we're not going to do that or I'm not going to hear that, then made more and more possibility or chance of that individual, even if they stay there, they're no longer connected
They're going
and
to
they
be, yeah,
don't
they're not going to be a
care.
contributor at the
Right.
level that they could have been. And
Yep.
I think it's important that we, whether again, you're running your own shop or you're within an organization, that we look at not offering periods and saying not ever, but maybe not now.
Right.
And here are the reasons why. Let's continue working on it.
Mhm.
I tell people, I said, reframing has never been more critical as one, work with organizations now throughout the nation. It's creating that culture, but also practicing, even with the folks that have been with you some time, because we can all forget, we can all revert. We revert back to the thing that keeps us comfortable and keeps us with the job, right? Even if
Yep.
that may not be the best place, and creating places where honesty can happen. Just did that with a couple of organizations, and it was amazing where we ended up at the end of the day of just being able to walk through that this is what we envision and what we want. How close are we to that? And why do you think we're not close? And how would you fix that? And there were ideas across the room.
Mhm.
Everybody knew the problem, but it wasn't something that, people asked them to surface up and say, here's the problem. They recognize it, but they were like, I said, well, how is that manifesting? What does that do to you? And they're like, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm having panic attacks. And luckily, the executives were in the room and they got a chance to hear all of that. But sometimes it does mean, with organizations and even with the conversation that we're having someone from the outside, that third party. So I'm hoping that the listeners will be thinking about this. Are you in the space now where that's occurring? Is there an opportunity to surface up some of what is happening? Is there an opportunity to make it better? And are you inviting in outside perspectives to just give you that, hey, I know we've gotten used to this. It's been a few months, a few years, or whatever the case may be. Are we stuck, or is there a place that we can move forward? And this is how.
Yeah, what you just said reminded me of a company I worked for. They were trying to figure out what was going on with the workplace culture, with the environment. They knew something was off. Maybe they knew, but they didn't want to admit it or accept it.
Right.
But um, I put a team together and we created a focus group, and it took several months to gather all the data. and it was anonymous. And when it came down to it, we identified four major issues and how they interrelated with each other. And when we presented it to leadership, some of them were like, wow, that's great. And the rest of them just shut it down. They didn't want to hear anything about it. It's
Yeah.
creating too much work. It's not that,
Yeah.
it's something else. We don't know what it is, but it's definitely not that. And it's like when you have 2,000 employees come to you, a quarter of your workforce and say, this is what's going on, there's a pretty high probability that's what's going on.
Absolutely.
What
Absolutely.
I think you brought up a good point, though. It's that leadership or executive level being there and hearing that and willing to accept, okay, yeah, we do have a problem. So, like Dave said, you can find all this data, you can bring outside sources in, but if they're not willing to really look at it, respond to it, then it's been a exercise in just an exercise because
Yeah.
you're not going to do anything with it.
Yeah, it's just been an exercise. And I always tell people, and I tell companies, I said, if you're securing my service, then tell me what you intend to do with the information. Here are the possible scenarios. If either one of these happen, are you prepared to go forward? If you're not, I would suggest that you save your money because I don't want you to do an activity as it changes over time. It's continuous, not just let me do a survey and then we get the results and I figure out that I don't want to get them published. So that means that it doesn't exist. Forget that. Just keep going back to work on what we're doing. So again, openness, the doors can carry, as we again taking us back to our topic, can carry a variety of different meanings. But as a leader, I mean, I think creating doors is the open-mindedness.
Yeah.
It's that. If you're a job seeker, it's that, recognizing that, your next opportunity may not look the way that it looked in the past. It may mean you driving. I mean, I think life as we knew it prior to COVID and life as we know it now, it's very different, and we all have to be very open to what that looks like. Sometimes you're in the driver's seat, sometimes you're a passenger, but each space and each place you're a contributor, and that means opening doors, perspectives, minds, creating. And I think that's so wonderful that this is what your podcast allows for listeners to be able to engage at that level and hear that no, you're not going crazy, that yes, this really is the right feeling to have about how life can be viewed in a different way and how we tackle it.
Yeah, and I love the door metaphor. And I was just thinking, some of the doors I've created or went through have been heavy and big, and
Yeah.
some have been small and light. Some of them had windows, some of them had a little peephole. You can see a little bit what's on the other side. Some have bars, and you're just like, I got to get out of this place or let me in. It's
Yeah.
like, so I love that you use the metaphor of doors, creating doors, because there are so many different possibilities out there. What Joe said earlier, creating the possibilities, creating those doors, finding those doors. If you can't find them, then like you said, create your door, and that's what Joe and I have been doing with this podcast. We're like, we don't fit into a lot of places, that it's just for whatever reason, we just don't fit. But where we do fit is in this podcast and what we believe in and what we believe this podcast is doing for people. And that's our door. That's our room that we're in right now with you and with the other guest speakers.
Yeah, I think it's just, so important that with, whether it's, I call it, I love the sliding door. I mean, those are easy, but, talking and coaching folks on when it's not a sliding door and it's one of those heavy ones, as you mentioned, how you can still progress and move forward with those, but also in recognizing that with the doors, that some of them may be locked. And if that's okay, and that being okay with a locked door and realizing that opportunity is not just hidden behind a single door, there's opportunity behind multiple doors, and some of which you create. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Again, we're talking so much about doors. I just think of doors that are left open,
Mm.
doors that are just cracked that we peek in and say, oh no, that's not the right time to go through that door. Let me try this other door. I mean, it almost takes you back to the game show. Which door do you want to choose?
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think that's the beauty of it because it's like I said, I think at the very beginning, even if we have a blueprint, we have a plan of where we're trying to go, and you said this earlier, life is not linear. So it you could be headed down this path and realize, oh, that's the plan I had, but that door doesn't seem the right fit. It doesn't have, big enough view for me to go through. So I'm going to try this other door. So yeah, I really like the idea of thinking of it as a door. I mean, again, you can do so many different things with a door. You can have different types of doors. So this is,
Yeah.
I think this is a very good way for
Yeah.
people to kind of relate to this.
Relate to it. And again, as we're at the point now where it's reflection and,
Mhm.
preparation. So having this conversation is a critical one, both with someone that you trust or even with organizations or, just like what we're doing now in helping to lay out a framework of this is really something. It's not something that's off base with what we're communicating. It's more on base with that, how we view the next 12 months that we're walking into should be with a mind of openness, but also should be with the mind of creativity and with the idea that, what, there will be some, as we walk into the room, some different ingredients that we might use. We're probably going to use a lot of the same ones, but we'll probably add to it. And being okay with, I call it the commas, and even let's, for the sake of our conversation, with the additions, you know we we can't operate, nor will there ever be, I think, the luxury from my perspective, you all may have a different vantage point, of being able to just get in one corner and believe that that corner is going to be yours forever. I mean, there is just so many things happening beyond our controls that figuring out where you fit. I would caution listeners, though, because there are so many opportunities and doors, making sure that you're not, jumping from one spot to the next just for the sake of jumping, because there are so many, be an influencer, be this, be that, be this. You do need to settle in on something to really hone your skills, but by and large, realizing that, next year is an opportunity. It matters how you look at it, how you attack it. And this conversation just gives you a starting point for it.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got a couple
Absolutely.
minutes left. So just a little
Yeah,
time
so
check.
this has been a great conversation, and I think we could continue on along this line or this path. So, like Dave said, we only have a couple of minutes. So, Dr. Kimberly Moore, what would you want to leave our audience with today?
I
What
think
final
probably the
thoughts?
biggest thing that I'd like to leave the audience with is to be one, excited about their future,
Mhm.
to be excited about possibilities, to recognize that if that really that they are the author. You're the author of your next best chapter, and that the control that you have, you don't want to relinquish by being in a box. Figure out where you tick and where you tick well, like what's great about you, and make sure that those things are highlighted, because that's where you're going to thrive and be your very best. So I would say to um, grab a seatbelt. You're up for yourself because you're going to be on a great ride, and to just be open to the journey that, creating doors and opening doors for yourself. And hopefully some will be open for you in the new year. That's always something that makes it easy. But if not, then have that desire and willingness to open those doors and create them for yourself.
Wow. Well, Dave, I know you probably can't top that, so but I'll give you that opportunity to finish out the
There
show.
is no way I can top that. I mean,
Yeah.
this topic is just, I think it's been one of my favorites so far. The metaphor of the door, the different doors, the different color of doors, the style of doors, the weight of the doors, the color of the doors, the mechanics of the doors. I mean, we go on and on. I think that's very relatable to people. Food, money, transportation, and housing are common themes that people can relate to. And this is just a piece of one of those. It's a piece of that home that they live in or that they work in. And I I I find it very helpful to provide good analogies and good metaphors to help um, bridge the divide between our different professional careers and personal lives and cultures and backgrounds, to say, hey, we do have things in common. We just have to sit down and listen to each other and pay attention to what other people are saying and what they're sharing, instead of racking our head, bashing our head against the wall saying, why isn't this working? When you have
Right.
three experts in the room saying, hey, we've got something to share. You can listen to us or not listen to us, but it might be better to not
Yeah.
have to take the long, painful, scenic route.
So true.
Well, and both great summaries for this podcast, and I'll just highlight the one thing that me and Dave talk about all the time, and it's the excitement for the next thing. And that's again, I say this a lot. I'm excited about what's next, like a kid in a candy store, because that's the excitement I have, and that's why I look at open-mindedness, just that door being open to the possibilities. So this has been a great conversation, and we would love to have you come back and maybe talk about other topics, because this was, like Dave said, this was one of the best ones, one of the best conversations we've had on the podcast. So thanks
It would
for your insights
It would
today.
certainly be my pleasure. I have enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed the energy around how do we make people, or at least give them the tools to be better as we walk into the new year together. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And again, if you want to follow Dr. Moore, we'll put her information in the description, so that if you want to work with her, you want to talk to her, I'm sure she'd be open to conversation, discussion. So we've enjoyed this podcast, like we've all said, but we want to continue to help you move forward in your careers and your journey. So again, me and Dave are on our journey, and separate and together, like we talked about, and we've been talking about in the last few episodes, just the things we're trying to do with our podcast, and to improve it. So again, I didn't say this, that's the very beginning, but this is the personal, professional, and career development podcast, and again, we want to help you with your journey. So with that, we want to thank you all for tuning in, and we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.